Hey guys, today on Onin's Rite, I want to talk about something a little bit more design focused. Namely, I want to discuss the design and balance of the Battlerites. Because right now we're kind of stuck in a position where a lot of champions just have one build that you always make. If you've been looking at the images summing up the Battlerites choices in the Manly Bacon tournaments, you'll see that a lot of champions just always go for the same Battlerites on the same players and also between players. Optimally, you'd love for Battlerites to always have every single one of them a viable pick for anyone in any given circumstance, but you know, that's kind of wishful thinking. In practice, you want them to be viable enough to have several different playstyles work out for each champion, to have a couple potential deviations from your usual build depending on what setup you're playing against. And in general, you just want at least someone in some situation to use any of these Battlerites. So in order to see why some of them are objectively worse than others, you kind of have to look into what specifically Battlerites do and what they should do for each champion. And the first thing I'll show an example of is like the core use of a Battlerites. If we look at Jade's round 1 rights, she can choose between stealth turning her immaterial, a revolver shot reducing the cooldown of her stealth, or getting additional ammo for landing a disabling shot so she fires twice as fast for a little while. Now, everyone always picks evasion. And part of that reason is because immaterial is kinda broken. It lets you dodge literally everything, and that's a good thing to be able to do. But the main reason isn't just because it's immaterial and immaterial is overpowered. If you look at what, from a design perspective, these things do, these Battlerites here. Gunslinger, it is worded pretty neatly, but the only thing it does is reduces the cooldown of your stealth. It's nice that it's related to how much you actually hit, that puts a bit of a skill factor on it, but if it had just said your stealth cooldown is reduced by 2, it would functionally be about the same. And Desperado lets you do additional damage with a skill that otherwise doesn't really do damage, but if you think about it, in this game you kind of do everything you do in order to land damage. You silence them so that they can't hit back and you can keep damaging them safely before you have to step out. You stun people to set up for damage from yourself or your allies, etc. Everything in some way deals damage or allows you to deal more damage. So these two rights just make these abilities numerically better at what they always do. They just boost them. But this gives you a bonus ability. It lets you turn immaterial, which otherwise you're completely not able to do as Jade. I mean, you can jump over people. It's technically an immaterial, but you know, you have another way to instantly get immaterial and immediately get away, and everyone immediately loses track of where you are because they can't follow you with the damage. So we have one bonus ability and 2 boosts to abilities. And you'll find as a general rule that bonuses are just stronger than boosts in the majority of cases. To give you a better example of that, let's look at Ashka. So Ashka's round 1 rights, he can either have Flame Strike, deal additional damage, and inflict Ignite. Now, getting extra Ignite sources is nice, because your M2 is otherwise the only one, in your ulti. But M2 is not all that reliable to hit. You need setup, you need freedom for that, so getting easier ways to land Ignites is really nice. It gives you so much more damage and pressure. But this is still just a numerical boost. You have a skill that you use to deal damage, and it deals additional damage. But it competes with Searing Flight, gaining an extra fireball that inflicts Ignite. So here you have an ability that also doesn't base inflict Ignite, but you don't use this for damage, and you get the ability to deal additional damage with it. thanks to applying Ignite and getting a bit of extra damage from that one. Plus, it also turns this ability that otherwise is just a teleport, which you can use for mobility, can just use the dodge, gives it an extra 50% movement speed for a little while, which gives you even more mobility, ability to run people down, to quickly reposition, or to simply dodge things for a while after using it. So here you've got a skill that gives a bonus ability that directly competes with the skill boost, and therefore is just objectively better. You should basically never pick Char and always pick Blaze in that circumstance. Knockout is also cool. This is also a bonus ability, so you might want this one, but usually everyone takes Blaze and no one takes Char, because any reason that you take Char, you would take Blaze instead. It's just better at doing the same thing. So the general rule is kind of bonuses are simply better than boosts. There are some exceptions to that, which really show how the balance should be done. So Croak on round 1 has the ability to gain an extra charge on his M2, which is a little bit in between a bonus and a boost. Like, on one side you can say you can now use this small AoE to hit 2 people with, so gives you the extra ability of more toxin spread. On the other hand, you can also kind of see it as, you know, it's just a bigger AoE, or it's a lower cooldown because I can use one and then a couple seconds later I can use the next one and then the cooldown's already ticking, etc. So it's kind of in between. You've got Noxious Reaction, which lets your lunge root. Otherwise, this lunge doesn't really do all that much. It's mostly just for mobility and a little bit of extra damage. But with this, you can get bonus damage and also a root, which stops people from chasing you or sets up additional damage from your allies. But despite having the option between these two bonuses, people generally take Venom Strike, the extra damage on camo. And that's kind of just because it's so good. You have a skill that already doesn't really add much in terms of damage. Like, you get charges on your M1, which is a source of damage, but there are situations where you just already have those and it does nothing. But then you get an extra bonus 10 damage on a skill that you use as setup to combo with your allies. So basically, a skill that you use for burst damage now gets even more burst damage. That makes it pretty good. It's just a very strong boost, so that even when it competes with 2 bonuses, it's still often worth taking. This is something that you can see back in Jade as well. On round 3, you can choose between having health on Disabling Shot, which is a bonus. It's a bit of a defensive bonus, so that makes it not obviously the best choice, but, you know, it's good. You have lower cooldown on Blast Vault, which sounds amazing, like your space, having that up at all times keep you safe. Having 2 seconds off that sounds amazing. But people generally take Snipe. Why? Because it's a burst damage skill. And burst damage, as I mentioned in the double DPS episode, is super important because it gives you rune control. It gives you the ability to damage people's real HP so that you can counter healing. So basically, the higher damage a skill does, the more valuable bonus damage to that skill becomes. And it doesn't specifically have to be your own damage, it can also just be the setup for an ally's damage, like in the case of Croak. But in general, you want to have a good amount of bonuses, and they're generally going to be better than boosts, unless the boosts are really good. And I think Varesh is really the champion that nails that down. Because his choices, in round 1, you can either basically boost the cooldown of your Shatter, you can boost the protection of your barrier by letting it apply its weaken, or you can get an additional Wuju cast. So you have a boost, and you have a bonus, a skill that lets you either hit an additional counter. Either lets you hit an additional counter, or it lets you threaten that additional counter. Like, oftentimes you pick this right, you trigger Wuju once, and then you just don't trigger it the second time, because you obviously want to use it, and your opponent thinks you want to use it, and they're gonna play more defensively. And you simply don't use it, and you simply keep on hammering them with your M1 while they're playing defensively and not really reacting as strongly as they could be. So, bonus ability. Round 2, you can have AoE damage on Hand of Judgment. In other words, it can deal more damage in some situations. You can have a longer snare from Corruption. Or you can make your Inhibitor's Guard heal people, so that you can actually top off people that got hurt. You can heal yourself from pressure. You can kind of just retreat and get a steady flow of health coming. It doesn't come from pickups. So that's a new ability. And then you just have 3 boosts. Longer silence, additional damage, lower cooldown, higher movement speed, less energy, and better weaken and amplify. So what this makes is you have a couple boosts that really aren't that impressive and therefore have a very hard time competing with the bonus that's in the same round. So basically all the time people pick the Wuji recast, pick the Inhibitor's Guard heal, because it's just so much easier to add this to your playstyle, to work around this, to get additional value from these. But then there's the overarching design problem, which is, what if you just don't like how Varesh plays? What if you don't really like the core gameplay loop of hitting M1s and M2s, shattering them, and keeping safe in the meanwhile? You kind of don't have anything else. You don't have other options, because so many of his Battlerites, like all of these, are boosts. They just make him better at the thing that he already does. So if you don't enjoy the thing that Varesh already does, there are no rites that are gonna make him more fun for you. If there's like a little something missing, if he's like kind of okay, but if he just had a, you know, a little bit, if he was a little bit faster or more mobile, more agile, or if he had more burst damage, that would be cool. I'd like him more then. Well, there's basically no options for that. He plays the way he is designed. He can get more ways to apply debuffs, he can get higher effects from his debuffs, and that's where his Battleright design ends. And that, in my eyes, just makes him really boring, because I don't really like the core gameplay loop that he has, and I have no ways to fix it. If you do like that core gameplay loop, then you enjoy Varesh. That's kind of how it works. So that really shows why having just enough bonuses is important to the health of a Battleright, of a champion. That really allows the variety to shine through. Because there's so little variety on what a Varesh is. There's so little ways that you can adapt Varesh to the opposing team. So that leads me into the second point, which is a little bit more difficult and is something that takes a bit of explaining to come through. So, optimally, you would want all 3 of these Battlerites to kind of promote a different sort of playstyle. And I'm using playstyle kind of because I can't really think of a better word for it, because it's not like you should just have, you know, the damage tree, the healing tree, the control tree. That's not what I mean. If we look at Freya, we have a couple of ways that you can play her, which are actually significantly varied and actually are supported by her Battleright design. So the way that most people play her in 2s is kinda like this. You just make her M2 super good. You get your double charges, you get your bonus damage from hitting it twice in a row, so that you can constantly spam this the walling cap thing. You can get your extra movement speed from it if you want. You can get the AoE damage from it if you want. And, you know, some of these are kind of optional. I mean, if you can take this, you give up on overcharge, which you may not want to do. And you're still probably going to want this if you have the twin hammers, because you get extra value from it. Same thing with this one. But you might just want the extra movement speed. You know, you can vary that up a little. But that's also important. But the thing to note is that you have a very clear route of rites that are just about, I'm gonna spam my M2. And some of you might know it's been kind of proven how insanely viable just M2 Freya is. I'm not sure, I think it was Finlev or someone just played Freya using not a single cast of M1 in 2v2s, I think, and he got to grade 14 with that playstyle. It's kind of ridiculous. Anyway, point is, you've got a playstyle that's about maximizing her ranged potential, her zoning, and just using her M2. Then you've got something like this, which is additional shields, additional shields, additional shields. So this is another mechanic of Freya that's a little bit more advanced, but I think most people understand it now. Your shield is the same for every skill. So every time you hit one of your shield giving abilities, all of your shields get their duration restored. So if you get a complete chain of constant shields, you can stack them up pretty heftily and get so much protection in a round. Like with this full shield build, you can see Freyas with like 200, 300 protection in an ordinary round. It's like Varesh levels of protection, sometimes even higher than their own healer. So that's another playstyle. And then you kind of have a third one, which, you know, might be something like this, which is basically get in someone's face and tunnel the shit out of them and just constantly hit them with everything. It's a bit more of a stretch than the other two, but it's something that I sometimes go for. I sometimes go for the rights that are just about sticking on a Lucy and just murdering her and only her. It's a bit more of a fringe, but, you know, it's hard to find 3 playstyles that work for every single character. You can try this for yourself with, especially the healers tend to have really good options for 3 completely different playstyles. But then you can compare that to someone like Taya. Let's see what her rights are. She can have a stun on her Wind Strike, which is basically melee-ish control. You can have haste, making your M1 snare people, which is kind of ranged control, I guess. And then you can have an AoE haste, which is a disgustingly tiny AoE, so I don't know why you'd ever pick that. Honestly, I've never seen anyone make good use of that. So here you kind of have these weird concepts of melee / low range control, long range control, and ally synergy, I guess. And in the second round you have a really terrible heal. You have bonus damage on crosscut, which is a burst, deals a ton of damage, so this is obviously going to be valuable. And a really good CC on Wind Bomb. So you have a... If you think about what these are supposed to do, you're kind of not really seeing much of a theme, are you? Like, you don't really see how these combo very well together. None of these really work together in any synergistic fashion. Like, if you already have people stuck in a vortex, then what's the point in snaring them? If you have people, a lot of CC on your on enemies, do you really need a boost to your allies? The only one that kind of makes sense is this tree or potentially this tree, which is like, keep melees off you, and heal you, and either heal you even more or have the additional escape potential of an extra haste after your tornado. So most of these rights aren't exactly bad. I mean, this is kind of bad, this is numerically terrible, and all 3 of these are okay. But there's not really 3 playstyles that you have. You don't have a playstyle that's about getting... Well, you could kind of have a playstyle that's about getting in people's face. That's what this one kind of starts off, but the rest doesn't really follow up on. You have the playstyle of just maximizing X-Strike damage, but that kind of doesn't fit with any of the M1 rights and kind of conflicts with here, because both of these work really well for that. Either the CC on Wind Bomb or the bonus damage on X-Strike. And then you have the Wind Bomb reducing cooldown, which... I mean, it kind of maybe works. The problem here is that this order just doesn't really work. Because you generally just want to Wind Bomb into X-Strike, and then As far as the cooldowns go, it could work okay, because you can immediately X-Strike, and then you can hit someone with a wind bomb, and now it's on 4 seconds. You can either have it down to 2 or immediately ready, depending on if you hit 1 or 2 people. It's like the numbers kind of add up, but then you have this weird rotation where you have to use X-Strike off cooldown every single time for this to make any sense. So maybe, okay, it could work. But I don't see a third one. I don't see a good control path, or a good, like, M1 damage focus, or long range focus, or anything. And the biggest problem, honestly, with this is that there's no way that you can switch between them, you know? You can't just start out with going for the range damage, and then think, no, I need defense. This is kind of a nothing build. You can't really start out with ally synergy and then start going into X-Strike, because then these kind of playstyles often just don't match up in the way you want to position yourself, or the way you want to spend your cooldowns. Go back to Freya. That's not Freya. There we go. You can kind of mix and match these. You can start off with getting Thunderclap for the shielding, and then just, you know, realize that you can actually combo this much better into Thunderbolt. Like, this works the best together with Twin Hammers, but you don't have to. You can use it together with Torrent. You can use it together with Spring. You can, because this inflicts your static, so you can, like, jump on someone, hit them, M2 them, and get this bonus as well. You can kind of mix and match how many shields you want. Oh, a lot of people get overcharged because it's a ridiculous skill, but still want Twin Hammers first because it's good. And then in round 3, you can choose. Do I need the extra mobility of Tempest? Do I want to keep focusing on M2? Or do I just want to get additional shielding, additional protection? These are viable options and questions that you can actually ask yourself, rather than getting stuck in the same build every single time. So that's optimally what you want to see from the 3 different playstyles that your Battlerites that your champions can get. That they're kind of interchangeable, and you can kind of switch from one path to the other whenever you need. And a lot of healers have that option, and I think healers for the most side are really well designed as far as Battlerites go. It's mostly the melee, the DPS champions that need some help in terms of this. So then there's a couple of other things that really need addressing. One of those is the question of risk versus reward. And for this I'm just going to need to compare things. So Lucy has this, right? Which gives her panic an AoE. It's pretty good. People take this pretty often. Primarily the reason people take it isn't just because they want their panic flask to be AoE. Because they want to have the ability to hit 2 people at once with it. Because what this actually does is make the effective range of it much bigger, and makes it much easier to hit it. Because this Rite explodes just when it hits something. Whether it's the wall, whether it's its max range, or whether it's an enemy champion. It's very easy to get value from this. On the other hand, we have something that I mentioned before. The AoE on Varesh's M2. This one doesn't work unless you actually hit someone with it. And that's a massive difference in risk versus reward. To have this do anything, you need to have 2 opposing champions stand close enough together for this AoE to do something. And that doesn't really happen all that often. Look at how tiny this AoE is, by the way. Oh wait, I actually... Look at how tiny this AoE is. Okay, it's actually pretty okay. But you know, it doesn't do anything if you miss. I don't think it even does anything if you hit a wall. It might, but I'm not sure. If you don't hit someone with it, it doesn't do anything. Whereas Lucy just gets additional AoE on her Panic Flask, regardless of whether you hit or not. And that makes it very low risk. It's a Rite that is gonna work in the majority of situations. It's not always gonna make you panic, 2 people, but it's also gonna have the bonus benefit of just if you barely miss someone, you don't actually miss. Whereas Varesh's Rite only works if you actually hit 2 people, hit someone when there are 2 people close together. So that's one that's high risk, low reward in direct comparison with another Rite. And there's other examples of that. Let's take Varesh's round 3 mantra heal. So this heals you and nearby allies, which I don't even know why that's a thing, but heals yourself and nearby allies when Kunju is activated. It doesn't say triggered, it says activated. There's a ally over here. You just click it and it works immediately. You don't have to actually trigger it, no one has to hit it. You just click the button and you and your allies immediately just get a heal. There's no risk to doing this other than putting your Kunju on cooldown. And, you know, if you use it in a situation where you wanted to Kunju anyway, you get this benefit whether it works or not. Whether it gets baited or not, you get your heal. Compare that to something like Croak's round 3 Rite's Frog Leap heals. So, same amount of heal on an important cooldown, only works when you hit. You need to actually hit it for this to do anything. So that's another thing that is gonna make some Rites just significantly better than others. Like, this is some direct comparisons, but it also works in, like, comparing the Rites on the same level. Like, Mantra's always gonna do something. Whirling Blade needs you to actually hit your Tenon swing. Spear's the Way needs you to actually use your Fleetfoot in a position where you want to do bonus damage. Like, those are maybes. Mantra always works on every Kunju all the time. It's guaranteed value. There's very little risk, very high reward. And that's something that just needs to be balanced out. Like, you don't need to make everything always trigger, but you need to reward it properly. Like, it's kind of ridiculous that this Rite that always works and has no additional requirements, you just click the button and you and your allies get healed, is on the same level as one that only works for you and only works when you hit people with a skill that's often not even that easy to hit. Like, just the power comparison, either this Rite should heal for significantly more, or add something additional to its effect, or this should just heal for less. Like, the easiest way to fix it was just to say, divide the healing it does among all the allies in range, you know? To say, if you're by yourself, you can have 16. If there's someone else you're sharing it with, you both get 8. And if there's 3 people, all 3 of you get 5. Still get the same amount of healing, but you don't get significant amounts of it. And, you know, preferably make it only trigger when your Kunju actually gets triggered, because you used your skill properly and took the risk for it, instead of just getting it instantaneously. And then there's just a couple of general rules. So one rule that I mentioned is things that give you additional damage tend to be significantly better when you put it on a skill that already does a high amount of damage. In other words, facilitating burst is better than facilitating pressure. You can see it's on Shifu, where Spear is the Way used to be okay, now it's kind of terrible because the synergy doesn't really work that well anymore. But if you want to compare it to Poise to Strike, which gives you immediate burst damage from your M2 every time you hit a Kunju, which already deals extra burst damage, this is a super good Rite that everyone takes. This one is kinda meh, because you get a little bit of bonus damage on a skill that's not really primarily used for damage. And the same thing we see in Jade. You have additional pressure damage from hitting that into a bunch of M1s, versus just bonus damage on your highest burst skill in the game. One of them is super good, the other one is kinda eh. The second general rule I found is that cooldown reductions tend to be kinda crap unless they are really strong, like really significant. One example here is Jade's Snipe. This one for reducing its cooldown by 1.5 seconds, which is really not that good because you kind of use Snipe in situations where you're gonna hit it, and generally speaking, it's usually off cooldown when you find one of those situations. Getting it hit and having it only be reduced by 1.5 seconds, like relative to the cooldown, that's okay, it's 25% of its cooldown, but it's not significant enough in the overall feel of a game that it's even worth picking. And I mentioned the same with Taya, and it's actually a better example still, because it's kind of the best Rite that you can get on round 3 in the majority of cases, but you really feel the difference when you hit a single target or 2 targets with your Wind Bomb when you're using Gathering the Storm. If you hit one guy, you reduce the cooldown from 6 down to 4, which is okay, I guess. But if you hit 2 people with it, you get a 4-second cooldown reduction. Just to show it off. Immediately ready again. And that's suddenly a super good ability. So you can really see the difference that it makes to have a minor cooldown reduction versus a really high cooldown reduction. So as far as that design goes, I think it's better to go for something like Lucy's Hysteria, which is, you know, a base cooldown reduction that costs nothing, and if you also manage to hit it properly, you get a better cooldown reduction. So that the Rite feels like it kind of changes how you approach it. You know, hitting your Panic Flasks becomes a lot more important, but you get a significant cooldown reduction so that it's actually, you know, reliably useful, but also kind of punishable, you know? And then there's another good example here on Pearl, which is simply... where is it? Bubble Shield cooldown reduced by 5 seconds. Now that's from 15 down to 10, which in percentages also isn't that great. It's 33%, just like 2 seconds of Wind Bomb. But the absolute of 5 seconds is just significantly greater than it sounds like. Like, this makes it far more commonly usable, and therefore a much better designed ability. So, in short, the way to make sure that all of these Rites are well designed and competitive, you need to make sure that there are enough bonuses and not too many boosts. That generally you'd like bonuses to compete with other bonuses and boosts to compete with other boosts, because bonuses tend to be stronger, and if you have a boost competing with a bonus, it has to be a really powerful boost to even be worth considering. Worth considering giving up an additional ability that your champion might have, rather than just sticking with the core abilities. You should try to promote 3 different playstyles to the extent that it's possible, and in a way that it's easy to switch from one to the other, and it doesn't just promote tunneling, like pigeonholing yourself into a single playstyle. And then you want to avoid cooldown reductions unless they're actually strong enough to make a difference. And if you're gonna have damage increases, put them on the skills that you use for for burst damage, so that you can actually make use of the most important thing that damage does. It's killing runes and hitting people's true HP. And I think basically every single one of these rules is broken on Varesh, which is why I think Varesh is pretty terrible right now. So that's it for this episode. If you have any suggestions, feel free to leave them somewhere. And